Oh, and I'm live on Twitch too. I've done it. Computer expert right here. This is what that degree was for. Um, okay, let me just get the chat. Thank you for bearing with me on that. I mentioned this for people who were, I guess, sitting on Twitch waiting for me to start talking, and I have been working a little bit to get a better setup for video, which is something that I'm using a different computer than I usually use, and so it is difficult for me, partly because it is a Windows computer and I am a Mac and Linux person. So you're going to have to watch me struggle with this operating system. Hopefully I won't have to share my screen or anything, and so we'll be okay. All right, getting this going. Yes, there we are. All right, so I think we're in business. Okay, so today has been crazy. I was planning to stream today anyway, because I know some of you liked the live streams I was doing during the Sam Bankman-Fried trial. Obviously, I am not in New York going to the courtroom in Manhattan anymore. So I don't have a day of trial to talk about, but I always have stuff to talk about. So for those of you who subscribe to the newsletter, quick plug, it's newsletter.mollywhite.net. I just published an issue an hour ago on a whole bunch of stuff. And I was planning to just talk about that because there's plenty of interesting stuff this week. And then midday today, the Binance news came out, and so it seemed maybe appropriate to talk about that. So I think I'll start off just chatting a little bit about what happened today with Binance, because that was pretty crazy. And then from there, we will go to some of the other stuff that happened this week. So, some people are asking about my dog. He is asleep on the floor right now. Actually, no, he's just pretending to be asleep. He is a big goofball and will probably make an appearance at some point. So Binance. So I don't know what the sort of average level of knowledge here is about Binance, so I'll give a little bit of background before I just jump into it. But Binance is the largest cryptocurrency exchange in the world. So Binance used to be FTX was number 2. But even then there was a big order of magnitude or so between Binance and FTX. Binance is huge. And so it is the sort of biggest target, I guess, in the crypto world, for US law enforcement and for people who are trying to crack down on crypto, regulators, SEC, CFTC, all those guys. Not to mention, Binance has been doing some shady shit for years. So it's not really news, I guess, that there's some weird stuff happening there. A couple years ago, there was this publication of this document that were called the Tai Chi Papers, which were about how Binance had set up this sort of web of shell companies to try to sort of make it look like they weren't serving U.S. customers, even though they really wanted to be serving U.S. customers. And that was years ago that came out. And so there's always been this sort of tacit acknowledgement in the crypto world that Binance is definitely doing some weird stuff. But, they seem pretty untouchable, I think, especially to the U.S. justice system, because they are not based in the U.S. In fact, they are not even really... No one really knows where they're based. They claim to have no headquarters, which is just something that, you're it's a business though. It has to have a headquarters. And they're no, we're modern. We don't have a headquarters, which I guess is, a nicer way of saying we don't want people to be able to sue us, or, don't have the Justice Department knocking on our doors. Anyway. Binance's CEO is a guy named Changpeng Zhao. He's usually called CZ, just his initials. He and Binance are sort of one in the same, I think in a very similar way that Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX were one in the same. Like, he is the public face of Binance. Anything he says is sort of taken to be a statement by Binance. His Twitter account and the Binance Twitter account are like both kind of interchangeable PR vehicles for the exchange. Like, he is Binance. And so that made it very surprising today when he resigned. And when he basically acknowledged that he and Binance had been doing all sorts of shady stuff. So a little bit about CZ. He lives in Dubai most of the time. He is a Canadian citizen. He also has some background with China. The sort of extent of that is not super well known, and he really does not like to acknowledge it and does not like it when it is brought up. So some lawmakers and people who are maybe somewhat skeptical of China and the CCP have sort of made claims that Binance is CCP sponsored and blah, blah, blah. I have no idea how accurate that is. I don't even know that much about Chinese politics and things like that, so I really can't speak to that. But he is very adamant that he's a Chinese citizen or a Canadian citizen. He's not Chinese. You know, he's called journalists racist for calling him Chinese and things like that. There are a lot of connections to China. So anyway, Jacob Silverman did some really interesting digging into some of that, and some of the weird, connections there, but he is ostensibly Canadian, but he has lived in Dubai for a really long time. Nobody really knows when the last time it was that he went to Canada. He definitely hasn't been in the US for a long time. You know, it seemed for a couple of years that he was very much evading or avoiding, you know, coming to the US or to any location that has like a friendly extradition treaty with the US. Like, he was not traveling much. In fact, just before the FTX collapse, Sam Bankman-Fried made a tweet joke kind of that, like, CZ might not even be allowed in the US, or he can't come to the US because he would get arrested or something like that, which some people think is partly why CZ got so pissed off and tried to tank FTX. I mean, I think it was a long time coming, but anyway, so that's the story there. So that made it really weird today when we found out that he not only pleaded guilty to a felony charge, but apparently showed up in Seattle to enter his plea deal. I have a lot of questions there. Like, how did that go down? What made him feel confident coming to the US and that he wasn't going to get, like, stuck in prison for 20 years or something like that? Anyway, not really sure what that was about. Backing up, there has been an investigation open against Binance for, I think, years now. Rumors of it became pretty commonplace in the last year or so. And it was pretty much, you know, sort of an open secret that the DOJ was looking into Binance. There were also enforcement actions filed by the CFTC in the spring against Binance, and then an SEC lawsuit against them in, I want to say, June. It was sometime this summer. And those were pretty surprising. I wrote about both of them. The CFTC lawsuit, I remember, outlined, and the SEC, but the CFTC one came first, outlined some behavior that looked pretty criminal. Like, reading that lawsuit, everyone was like, where's the DOJ indictment? You know, they're talking about fraud, they're talking about sanctions evasion, they're talking about, you know, trying to circumvent U.S., securities laws by, like, pretending that they don't have U.S. customers and things like that. So it was, like, pretty weird that never happened. There was a lot of theorizing that maybe there was a sealed indictment and that they were just waiting to get their hands on CZ. That was my theory up until a day or two ago. Hard to really say what was going on behind the scenes, obviously. I have no inside knowledge. But then there were rumors yesterday that the DOJ was approaching some kind of a deal with Binance. And that was really interesting because that was not really what we had been hearing for a long time. You know, some of the stuff that Binance was accused of was pretty major. You know, he is the head honcho really in the crypto world. I mean, I guess you could argue that maybe some of the Tether guys are, of the same scale as CZ, but he is like a big fish. It's not like he's going to rat someone else out, again, except for maybe the Tether guys. And so it seemed like kind of something that the DOJ might want to pursue. But today we got the news that so CZ pleaded guilty to a felony, resigned from Binance. He is prohibited from being involved with Binance. So like my first thought when I heard that he stepped down was like, okay, he resigned, but he's going to be like an advisor or something like that. He's not actually permitted to do anything like that. He has to pay a $50 million fine. And then there are sort of as yet undetermined consequences regarding the felony. So I think prosecutors are pushing for an 18-month prison sentence, which is some time. It is not Sam Bankman-Fried levels of time, but then again, a plea deal gets you pretty far. So that's sort of the deal with Binance, or with CZ. A little bit of context to the $50 million fine. CZ is a billionaire. His actual net worth is unknown. He's very cagey about that. He does not share things like that very publicly. It has been estimated at somewhere around like 20 billion is I think what Bloomberg put it at. Obviously, it's hard to estimate. They have like a confidence rating and it's very low for that. But like he has $50 million. It's not a big deal for him to pay that. So that's kind of a slap on the wrist. As for Binance, so obviously they no longer have their CEO. CZ has appointed another employee whose name I am forgetting right now to take his place. And they have to pay a $4.3-ish billion fine, with a B, which is considerably higher. It is one of the highest fines that I've heard of in recent history. So that is substantial. But again, to put it into context, Binance does huge revenue. They're the biggest cryptocurrency exchange out there, full stop. Again, they're very cagey around their revenues and things like that. I think they were estimated, and this is all very hand-wavy, but they were estimated to do something like $20 billion in revenue in 2021, and then somewhat less. I think it was something like 10 or 15 billion in 2022. Cryptocurrency markets were down, so they did less revenue. But still, it's more than $4 billion. So, to some extent, I think the fine is really not that much of a punishment. It's definitely not pocket change, but it is also, a fraction, a fairly large fraction of their annual revenue, but not insurmountable for them. This is not, a fine that is going to bankrupt Binance, I guess is what I should really say. Like, they will continue to operate, they will pay the fine, and they will move on. They have also agreed to monitoring for 3 years to have basically a watchdog come in and oversee their efforts to rectify all the problems that were identified. And I guess I should probably talk about what those problems were at some point. But basically, they can't just say, oh, no, we're sorry. We promise we won't do that again, and then wander back off to the ether and keep doing all this shady stuff. They will actually have somebody making sure that they comply with these requirements and things like that, and they can face further penalties if they don't comply. So fines, or they could be stopped from operating in the US to some extent. They could be shut down even. I mean, not necessarily globally, but in the US. So there is some teeth there, I think. But ultimately, they are being allowed to continue operating, which is pretty huge. And so, as far as I'm concerned, I see this as a pretty disappointing outcome. A lot of the stuff that was happening at Binance was very shady. They were sort of openly discussing how shady it was. And so to see them basically get a fine that's basically a slap on the wrist. CZ gets to retire with his billions of dollars. You know, maybe he gets a couple of months in prison. Maybe he just does house arrest or like probation or something like that. And then maybe he starts some other crypto firm, who knows? He's already been talking on Twitter about how he posted this really like, it looked like a retirement message. You know, he was like very cheery about it and like looking forward to what's coming next and blah, blah, blah. And it was like, man, you were just charged with a felony, you know? And he's like, I can't wait to start spending time with my family and, you know, investing some money in DeFi and all this stuff. So not the most remorseful thing I've ever seen. He did say something like, I made mistakes and I, you know, take responsibility for that. And then he has this like whole post where he says nothing about the mistakes and does nothing, you know, says nothing taking responsibility for it. So that was pretty typical, honestly. So yeah, pretty disappointed by it. To jump in a little bit to what actually happened there. Some of this is not really news. You know, it's not like new information, really. A lot of this came out in the CFTC lawsuit and then was like repeated in the SEC lawsuit. But basically, they didn't register as they were supposed to in the US. But you always see those types of charges on these things. Like, of course they didn't, because there wouldn't be a business if they registered. So they get charged with like unlicensed money transmission and stuff like that based on the fact that they were unregistered. They also had basically a farce of an anti-money laundering program. So any sort of money company, for lack of a better word, is required to know who they're doing business with. You can't just go up to a bank and like not give them your name. You know, they need to know who you are and they need to confirm that you are who you say that you are. And so there are these things called know your customer, anti-money laundering regimes that any money business, crypto or otherwise, has to comply with. And Binance was basically like wink, wink, nudge, nudge, like not really complying with that at all. They pretended basically that they didn't allow US customers to use the Binance.com exchange, which for people who are familiar with FTX, it's kind of a similar distinction where there was like FTX International, FTX.com, that was all the same thing. And then there was this little arm of it that was called FTX US. Same idea with Binance. They have Binance.com, which is the international, like global exchange that basically everyone except for US customers use. And then there's the Binance US exchange, which is just for US customers. And whenever exchanges do this, like the US version is sort of like the no fun allowed version of the exchange. You know, they have like the real exchange, which is Binance Global, and you can trade any shitcoin you want. You can get like a bazillion times leverage. You can do all sorts of stuff, you know, like really risky stuff. And then they give you the Binance US exchange, and it's like, all right, here are the 20 cryptocurrencies that you're allowed to trade. You know, that's like a fraction of the ones that they have on the global exchange. You can't do anything fun. You know, there's no leverage or very little leverage. And that's all because the US financial markets basically prohibit a lot of this really crazy leverage and the trading that's happening on the international exchanges. And then we also have, you know, securities laws, and a lot of these crypto tokens are securities. And so they just limit you to the 20 or so that they think they could maybe argue aren't securities. Turns out that's not going well for them. There are lawsuits from the SEC against Coinbase, Binance, Kraken, who else? About a million others. I could keep going, but they're escaping me now. Anyway, that have like, okay, here are the 20 tokens, and 15 of them are, my mic went weird. I fixed it. I literally did nothing, so I'm just gonna stop touching my computer. All right. I have no idea what I did. I will do some testing between now and the next time I stream, so I don't have to keep doing this. And now I've totally forgotten what I was talking about. It was something about securities. Yeah, hands are off. I am not. Okay, man. Yeah, so US exchanges, they typically try to list just what they think are arguably not securities. It turns out that most cryptocurrency exchanges have a very different view on what is a cryptocurrency and what isn't than the SEC does. And so those are really ongoing lawsuits basically to try to determine if like Solana and Polygon and Filecoin and the Sandbox token and all of these different things are cryptocurrency securities and not just cryptocurrencies. Anyways, what Binance is accused of doing is basically saying, oh yeah, we promise we won't let any US customers onto Binance.com, the international exchange. We will only let them use Binance US, where they get this subset of functionality. And then it turns out that, well, actually, no, they were just basically funneling their US customers to the Binance.com exchange. So basically, anytime there was like a high value customer or something like that, they would work with them in some way to get them to like set up a shell company outside of the US and use a VPN and make it look like they were trading from some other jurisdiction where they were allowed to, which is a big no-no, obviously. And so that is part of the charge here. There was some talk around sanctions. So there was not a whole lot of effort put into keeping the, making sure that people were not transacting with people who lived in sanctioned countries. And obviously the US is not thrilled about that. And so that was a portion of it. What else? I have it open. Failing to register, bad KYC. Yeah, so that's, I think, pretty much the gist of it. They had already been, I think, OFAC, which is like the US sanctioning group, had been working on some stuff around that. And then as sort of a part of this whole announcement today, the DOJ likes to do this thing where like they make a huge splash and not only do they drop an indictment against someone, but there's also all this other stuff that happens. And there's like this whole flurry of activity from related entities, agencies. And that's what they did today, where in addition to CZ pleading guilty to this felony and Binance agreeing to pay this huge fine, they also got the CFTC, OFAC, and FinCEN complaints sort of squared away today. So actually not all of that huge fine comes from or goes to the DOJ. I think 150 million of it or something like that goes to the CFTC to sort of settle out the complaint that they filed earlier this spring. Now, one thing that's really interesting is despite this attempt by the DOJ to have this big splashy announcement where everything was tied up with a neat little bow, the SEC was not a part of today's proceedings. And so that SEC complaint that I mentioned that was filed in June, as far as I know, is still ongoing, which is not great news for Binance. Because if the SEC prevails on that complaint, which says that, hey, these like 20 tokens or whatever are all securities and you've been trading them in the US without registering, like they will be stuck with Bitcoin, I guess, maybe Ethereum. And it is not necessarily clear that a cryptocurrency exchange could really compete in the US if all they can trade is Bitcoin and Ethereum. That would shut off a lot of Binance's trading activity. One thing I think that's also really clear from this lawsuit is that Binance was desperate to have US customers. In fact, I think that was clear from the CFTC and the SEC lawsuits as well. But, they went to major lengths to set up this whole web of shell companies and direct customers to this Binance.com exchange and all this different stuff just so they could get US customers. And so I think I think that's something that's really important to keep in mind when companies will like threaten to go offshore, like Coinbase is doing for a little while. They're like, well, fine. If you don't make the laws the way we want it, we're just going to go offshore and we're going to stop serving US customers. And like, I think those are pretty much always empty threats. They certainly are in the case of Coinbase, because Coinbase's whole company is it's all US basically. And so the idea that they would just like wander off and basically start from scratch seems pretty implausible to me. So, I think that's something to really keep in mind, is that like the US market is meaningful in crypto more than I think a lot of crypto companies are willing to acknowledge. And so I think there is, the potential for these DOJ lawsuits, whatever enforcement actions from various agencies to be very impactful on these crypto companies. Probably not, though, if they keep just being like, okay, here's a big fine, continue, So we will see how this all plays out. I'm curious to see what like post-settlement Binance is going to look like. I don't know a ton about the guy who is taking CZ's place. I assume he's going to be more risk averse than CZ, although that is a fairly low bar, I think. CZ has always been very willing to fly in the face of the rules and sort of put two middle fingers up to US regulators and law enforcement. And so I think most people would be more risk averse than him. But I'm curious to what extent this person is like willing to rein it in and, change the exchange's attitude towards US regulators. It seems to me, it's hard to really know like what the DOJ was going to, was hoping to accomplish with this. Like they obviously decided they didn't want to shut down Binance, in the US at least. So it seems like they're hoping that Binance can actually like clean up its act and be a legitimate actor in this space, which is like kind of wild to me. Like what's left at Binance if they are playing by the rules in the way that the DOJ and the SEC and the CFTC define the rules, right? Like that's different than what your average crypto trader defines the rules as. They are very by the book. And if you try to be a by the book crypto exchange, like there's not that much business there for that. Coinbase tried to be by the book to some extent, especially in its earlier years. And then eventually they were like, screw it. We're just going to list all these shit coins, and they are still like the by the book exchange. But even they realized that like they have to push it pretty far, to the point that they're now getting into these fights with the SEC and battling them and now lobbying Congress to change the rules. And so, it's kind of weird to like try to imagine what the world, the DOJ is imagining here. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe they're hoping that this is like a way to kill Binance without killing Binance. And they can be like, oh no, they couldn't kick it. They couldn't hack it once they had to play by the rules. Not our fault. That's Binance's fault. But I don't know if I buy that. So I don't know. Very weird day. I don't really know what to make of it. One thing that's funny is that the crypto world is like ecstatic about this. I've always joked that like everything is good news in crypto. And that's like no more, it's so apparently true today, because like anything can be good news for crypto, including the biggest cryptocurrency exchange getting fined billions of dollars, having their CEO plead guilty to a felony and be forced to shut down. Like that's good for crypto apparently. But basically the story that I've been seeing is like, we're weeding out the bad actors. Everyone's gonna, they're cleaning up their act. Everyone who was being shady is going to stop being shady. And then we're going to have a real regulated, legitimate cryptocurrency market. And they're going to approve all these ETFs and all this stuff. And then crypto will finally get mass adoption, like we've been saying for a decade. That is very far-fetched, I think. For one, I just went over the whole point around once you try to get people to have a like regulated compliant cryptocurrency exchange, there's not that much left. Like people can trade Bitcoin, I guess, and then like what else? There's no staking really because the SEC knocked that down. There's no shit coins because they're all securities pretty much. There's not much leverage allowed. There's not much lending allowed. Like it's just like, all right, I guess we'll all just gamble on Bitcoin now. So I don't know if I see this as bullish for crypto in the way that the industry does, but I guess, everything's good news. So they're, like hoping that Bitcoin's now going to go through the moon because there's so much less regulatory uncertainty and blah, 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 which I don't really fully understand. What else? The ETFs are really funny. So for those not steeped in cryptocurrency, first of all, congratulations. But basically there are a bunch of companies right now who are all trying to create ETFs, which it's short for exchange traded funds. And the idea is that instead of having to go to your cryptocurrency exchange and do all the weird stuff that entails and, figure out how to get your US dollars onto one of these exchanges, which has increasingly few options to do that, you would be able to go to your regular old broker, your Fidelity or whoever you have an account with, and just purchase shares of a Bitcoin ETF through the normal ass, like, the same place where you keep your retirement money and your stock portfolio or whatever. And this is something that crypto folks have been really wanting for a long time. There have been some ETFs already that have to do with futures, but what they're all arguing about right now are spot ETFs. So futures, to give a quick overview, futures is when you're trading like a Bitcoin future, you're basically betting that the price of Bitcoin will go up or it will go down. It's like a bet on the future performance of the asset. Spot is just going out and buying a Bitcoin right now for whatever it costs. And that's sort of what most people, I think of when you're talking about cryptocurrency trading. And so the spot ETFs are the ones that are really in the public eye right now because the SEC denied a bunch of them. They have been for years. There's been litigation going. And now there's this whole pile of them that are under review by the SEC. There was an appeal recently of one of them where an appeals court basically said to the SEC, like, we don't think your reasoning here was legitimate. You need to go back and do this one again. And so now people are like expecting that they're going to okay these things. And a lot of people in the crypto world are like jazzed about ETFs, which like, it's hard for me to really understand why, because I mean, I guess if you're one of the like number goes up crypto people, like all you care about is adoption and Bitcoin prices going up, like I totally get it then. You want more people to buy Bitcoin through any means necessary. Doesn't matter ideologically what's going on. You just want the number to go up. I get that. But for the people who like are somewhat ideological about crypto or who claim to be ideological about crypto, which I think is a much bigger group of people than the first set, ETFs do not make much sense because like if you look at like the Bitcoin white paper, it was all about like banks are bad, traditional finance is bad, these middlemen are bad, we want to have currency that is outside of the control of the government and the big financial system and the big banks, down with the banks. And now people are like, yay, BlackRock is trying to start a Bitcoin ETF. And it's like, you want BlackRock to like get into the Bitcoin world? Like, that's just like, I feel like Satoshi somewhere is like rolling over in his grave. thinking about BlackRock doing a Bitcoin ETF. So I don't really understand how at least the ideologues in the crypto world square that circle. Obviously, if you're a number go up person, totally get it. I do question to what extent the number will actually go up when and if a Bitcoin ETF is approved. I think people have really convinced themselves that like as soon as people have access to the potential possibility of getting Bitcoin ETFs, they will pour all their money into it, which I don't think is true. Like there has been, reporting about crypto and people are sort of aware that crypto is maybe not the most solid asset class. And I don't think that people are just going to forget about that because a Bitcoin ETF was approved. Like, I think that some people might see it as like easier from a UX perspective, which it certainly is. But I don't know if the whole like Bitcoin's going to go to the moon thing when the ETF is approved is really, I don't know if it holds water. And there was actually kind of a recent event where an Ethereum ETF was approved and people were like super excited about it. And then it just sort of was like a sad trombone where like nobody went and bought it. And I'm sort of curious if that might happen with the Bitcoin ETF. But anyway, that was a huge digression about ETFs. Looking at the chat. Yeah, someone asked to what extent the halving event in April might affect ETFs. I don't know if it really would affect the ETFs. Yeah, I mean, it will probably affect the underlying price of the asset to some extent, but I don't think it's going to make it more or less likely that an ETF is approved, assuming that that hasn't been settled by April, which it may well be. Yeah, I don't know. There's someone saying that Bitcoin ETFs don't conflict with the ideology of Bitcoin because it doesn't make them centralized. I get that. I get that it doesn't change Bitcoin, but I don't know why crypto ideologues would want BlackRock anywhere near their Bitcoin. And I think there's also, like, if I take a second here and I like take off my crypto skeptic hat and I put on my Bitcoin maximalist tinfoil hat, I would think that it would be risky for someone like BlackRock to start trading. This is big tinfoil hat, but I would think that if BlackRock or whoever, it doesn't matter who, gets into Bitcoin ETFs, you would worry that they were basically printing paper Bitcoin at that point because they are trading all of these Bitcoins or they are selling all of this ETF, which is supposedly backed by Bitcoin, without really knowing if their Bitcoins are there or not. And, wouldn't you worry then that they were using paper Bitcoin, which would then, you would think, depress the price of Bitcoin? But anyway, that's my tinfoil hat. I would think that the ideologues who believe that banks are bad and, not a benefit to crypto or whatever would worry about that. But that's just me. And I am not a crypto ideologue, so it's hard for me to fully put the tinfoil hat on. But that's where I would go with it. Cool. All right, so I think that was kind of a decent overview of what happened with Binance. There's, like I said, there's still a lot to be determined around that particular saga. We don't know yet what sentence CZ is looking at. So he could face prison time. I would not be surprised if it is still a slap on the wrist and he is just house arrest or something, probation even. And then it's yet to be seen how, if at all, Binance will, meaningfully change their activities as a result of this. It remains to be seen how different this new CEO is. Like I said, I haven't had an opportunity to really look into it and into this guy's history or his sort of views on things. Obviously, I will be doing that. And then, there's this big question mark around the SEC lawsuit too. Like, it seems like they probably don't want to settle it, given that I imagine they had the opportunity to when it came to, today's events. I imagine the DOJ wanted to say, like, yep, everything's all dealt with, we're done, move on. But the SEC clearly did not play ball there. So I assume that's still underway. Binance was talking a big game about, like, battling the SEC and that kind of thing. Remains to be seen to what extent they decide to do that. I think a lot of these lawsuits are very similar. Like I said, a lot of these tokens that they claim are securities are the same across multiple lawsuits. I have a spreadsheet. I think I linked to it in today's newsletter. That's just like a list of the top, 100 cryptocurrencies or something like that. And then which ones of those the SEC has argued are securities and in which lawsuits. Actually, let me pull it up. There it is. So SEC versus Binance, SEC versus Coinbase, and SEC versus Kraken has like huge overlap in these tokens and which ones they decided to, describe specifically as securities. And even though they list 12, 15 of them in each of the lawsuits, they don't have to prove that each of them is a security. They just have to prove that one of them is a security. And that, I think, is going to be easier than the cryptocurrency exchanges would hope, because some of these seem very obviously to be securities, right? Like there are some which is like, I could see the argument that like maybe Polygon isn't a security or Solana or something like that. Like I could see where they would go to try to argue that. But then there are ones that are like BNB is a good one. Binance's exchange token. All of these exchange tokens are securities as far as I can tell. There are other ones that are for other crypto projects. So like I said, there's that Sandbox token is one of them. Filecoin is one of them. It's just like a lot of these look like securities and I don't know how they're going to get around that. And so if Binance just sort of keels over and is like, whatever, we're going to settle with the SEC, then, I wonder to what extent that will make it more challenging for other exchanges to, nail down that argument against it. Who knows? All right. I mentioned SEC versus Kraken. That was also the bigger news this week until Binance came out today. So let me just get that up. Also, I was delighted when I published my newsletter today that it's issue 44 and CZ's whole thing has always been like 4. Like he would post either just the number 4 on Twitter or he had all these pictures of him like doing this, it was this dumb reference back to this thing that he did. It was like New Year's resolutions or something like that, where he was like, I'm going to stop paying so much attention to FUD. There are all these FUDers out there in the in journalism and wherever. And so anytime someone posts FUD, I'm just going to post 4. And that's going to be my way of dismissing the whole thing. And it was like this weird, it was this weird bit that he did where he just wanted to like basically claim that everything any journalist ever printed about Binance was a lie. Anyway, I was very delighted today when it was issue 44 because that just seemed very appropriate for the Binance falls apart issue. All right, so Kraken. Like I said, the SEC has these lawsuits against a bajillion cryptocurrency exchanges. So I mentioned Binance. There was Coinbase, obviously, was another big one. They have, I think, they had something against Justin Sun. And then there was obviously the Ripple stuff. I'm just looking at and Terra, obviously. So those were the but SEC and Coinbase and Binance were the two big ones. And then today they threw Kraken in there as well. So Kraken is also a US exchange. It's not huge. Coinbase has sort of the top market share in the US for crypto exchanges. Kraken is somewhere up there. I don't know where they rank exactly, but they have a decent, people know of them in the US, but it's not like Coinbase, but the SEC finally got around to them today, I guess, or not today, but this week, and filed the sort of standard lawsuit. It almost looked like they just sort of copied and pasted part of the lawsuit against Coinbase, where it was like, you listed all these crypto tokens and we think they're securities, and like the list is practically the same, or at least there's really substantial overlap. And so that part was kind of unsurprising, uninteresting, honestly. Just the standard argument. Obviously, it will become more interesting as Kraken decides to litigate it, which I think they probably will. They made some statement to that effect, at least. But the more interesting thing about the SEC lawsuit against Kraken is they made sort of additional claims of wrongdoing. So the Coinbase lawsuit is very dry, honestly. It's it just says basically you listed these securities and there's a disagreement, obviously, where Coinbase thinks they're not securities and we think they are. But besides that, there wasn't that much of juicy stuff. Contrast that to the Binance lawsuit, where there was this additional detail about what really looks like fraud, discussions of sanctions evasion and anti-money laundering issues, and this whole thing where they were funneling US customers to the offshore exchange and such and such. So they were pretty different lawsuits in that sense. Kraken, I think, is somewhere in the middle between the two. It wasn't the sort of dry Coinbase lawsuit, but it wasn't as bombshell, wow, these guys are really doing shady stuff, quite to the extent of Binance, although it was still pretty bad. So basically, the SEC alleges that Kraken was commingling customer funds with corporate funds. Sorry, my dog is doing some sort of yoga. And so basically, instead of having, one bank account or crypto wallet or whatever for company money that's used to pay salaries and, loans and whatever else you do, and then a totally separate, firewalled account that is for customer funds that are just supposed to sit there until the customer wants to trade or they want to withdraw or whatever. Kraken was kind of we'll just all throw it in this one big spot and then deal with it later. And as long as it's all there, who really cares? Which sounds kind of a lot like FTX, for those of you who followed that particular story, where they just sort of treated customer funds as though they were company funds. And I mean, if you take a fairly gracious reading of the situation there, Sam Bankman-Fried basically argued, well, I thought we had enough money and that we were only ever spending customer funds or company funds and not customer funds. And then obviously that turned out to be false. So, I think the timing of this is particularly convenient for the SEC and inconvenient for Kraken, because anyone who reads this lawsuit is going to go, ooh, that sounds like FTX. And everyone knows what happened with FTX. And we just saw this guilty conviction against the head honcho there. And so, I think that is not great for Kraken. But, we'll see, I guess, again, to what extent this gets nailed down in court. And the other interesting thing about the Kraken lawsuit, which I think I pointed out in my newsletter, is that this is not the first time the SEC has gone after Kraken. In fact, it is not the first time this year that the SEC has gone after Kraken. The SEC went after Kraken in February of this year for their crypto staking program, where basically they said, give us your ETH or maybe some other tokens, I don't remember, and we will stake it for you, and you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to do all the technical stuff that comes along with staking. We'll take care of it, and then we'll just pass the rewards back to you, and no big deal. And the SEC earlier this year had this moment where they were like, we think staking is a security. And so they cracked down on a whole bunch of different staking projects, including Kraken's. And Kraken paid $30 million of a fine in February. So, it's interesting, I think, to see the SEC come out now and do a whole other thing against Kraken when they just spent all this time doing one, a lawsuit earlier this year. Kraken is also kind of a frequent flyer in the Web3 is going just great site. So let me just pull it up here. They had to pay a $360,000 fine in November of 2022 about to do with sanctions violations. Basically, they were not properly stopping people from trading with customers in Iran. And they had to do this basically settlement with OFAC around sanctions on Iran, and they had to say, they had to commit to beefing up their sanctions compliance program. Yeah, so basically it was OFAC, SEC number 1 in February, and then SEC number 2 in, last week at some point this week. I don't even know what day it is, much less what week it is. So Kraken is, I think, not exactly smiled upon by US regulators. They've also always been quite confrontational with US regulators. Kraken is definitely like, if you compare Kraken to, say, Coinbase, Kraken is like the ideological crypto exchange, especially with their previous CEO, whose name was Jesse Powell. He was very ideological about crypto in the sort of libertarian sense, and the sort of like, we don't care what the government says, we don't have to answer to you, we won't comply with sanctions, or, all these different things that cryptocurrency companies have to comply with, especially when they are domiciled in the US. And so I think they sort of fell onto the wrong side of some regulators when that happened. Jesse Powell is no longer the CEO of Kraken, although I think he still holds some sort of role there. He's like the chairman or something like that. But there is now some other person who I'm not super familiar with. But I think Kraken is going to be facing kind of an uphill battle here. Not least because just the reputation that they have is just like kind of, fly by the seat of the pants, no one can make us play by their rules, et cetera, et cetera. All right. So I think that's Kraken. Will I make a video with crypto critics? I have done several. So I've been on their podcast, I want to say at least 3 times. I don't remember. At least one of them was before they started doing video, but I was on there pretty recently talking about the FTX trial. They did a series with journalists and then me, basically talking to people who were in New York watching the trial. So you can catch that if you want. What am I drinking? Polar seltzer, baby. It's the best seltzer out there. I will take no arguments. Oh, you meant a Crypto Critics Corner on this? I don't know. That's up to the Crypto Critics Corner, guys. There are some podcasts where if they invite me to come on, I will always say yes. Crypto Critics Corner is one of them. I love Crypto Critics Corner. But obviously they have their own schedule and plans, and probably don't want to just have the same person on like 20 different times. So, all right. So now the next thing I wanted to chat about is Bored Apes, broadly speaking, because this is a big week for the apes. In fact, it's been a big month for the apes. Some of you probably recall the headlines around Yuga Labs blinding some of their Ape Fest attendees, because Ape Fest is the party for the Bored Apes, which sounds like just a blast. Oh man, there's nothing I want to do than hang out with 400 people who all spent $100,000 on a JPEG. So that wasn't a great PR moment for them. They basically, what happened, for those who didn't hear about this, is they held this big party. They wanted to use black lights at said party, and they say it was an event coordinator, which I think is probably true. I doubt like the Bored Ape CEO was out there picking out, show lights, but they used the type of UV lights that are meant for like germicidal applications, like disinfecting, instead of the ones that are meant for, entertainment. And they basically burned people's eyeballs. The good news there, both for the attendees and for me, as far as my own conscience, is that it's called like photokeratitis, I think, is like pretty much always temporary. And so everyone was pretty much fine. And also they were in Hong Kong. And so medical care was cheaper than it might have been in the US if you had to call an ambulance, because like, yeesh, that would have been bad. So I don't feel too bad laughing at this, but just like, it's one of those things where it's like, come on, how did that happen? And then like, imagine trying to explain that. You're like, yeah, I went to this party in Hong Kong. It's like, oh, how was it? Well, I woke up at 4 a.m. with searing eye pain because my ape company didn't know which lights to use. So far, I haven't heard of anyone suing Yuga Labs over this. I would be very fascinated to watch that happen. I wouldn't be surprised if Yuga is just like paying for people's medical bills quietly, because that seems like how I would deal with it if I was a company and wanted to deal with a PR problem, especially when the medical bills were like a couple $100s or something like that. But anyway, that was very funny. The more sort of serious, well, it's not really that serious. The more interesting, I guess, Yuga news, and also just to clarify for people who aren't familiar, Bored Apes, the NFTs, were created by a company called Yuga Labs, which is why I'm referring to both of those things. So the company is called Yuga Labs. The NFTs are called Bored Apes. They also have other NFTs. They bought some other major NFT projects, and so they run those. And then there's like the spin-off ones, like the mutant apes and all these different things. But Bored Apes are like the best known. The other thing that happened recently in the Bored Apes extended universe is there's been this ongoing lawsuit by Bored Apes against an artist called Ryder, who is a performance artist, I guess, and maybe some other types of art. And he made what were basically knockoff Bored Apes. So Bored Apes got really big. They were selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And this guy shows up and creates his whole NFT project that is literally just like copies of the apes. In fact, I think it maybe was like even pointing to the very same URLs and stuff. Like it was the same apes. But he claimed that this was protected freedom of expression as an artist because this was an art project, and that he was drawing attention to the fact that he believes the Bored Ape project imagery artwork is heinously racist in a whole bunch of different ways that he goes into in great detail, to do with, the things that they're wearing and the fact that it's monkeys that are being portrayed, and some of the like props that they're holding, he argues are racist and all that kind of stuff. I've looked into the claims. I think it's kind of a weird thing. Like, I doubt that these people were, what's the way of putting it? Like, I doubt that they were like setting out to make the most racist NFT project they could, but it does seem like they were probably including some sort of nods to like 4chan and just like edgy, weird online humor that is pretty racist, you know? And so like, I don't think he's totally out there on this, and like there's definitely some weird stuff around like the founders and some of the stuff that they've been involved with and some of the people that they've associated with and all that kind of stuff. So like I don't think he's totally off the wall on this, but I also think he's maybe a little bit over the top on some of the claims where he's like, these people are Nazis, blah blah blah, you know, very very extreme about it. Who's to say, honestly, like, you know, and who's really to say whether it really matters, the distinction between someone who is like full on racist Nazi versus like making these wink wink nudge nudge like 4chan illusions. You know, it's still kind of the same group. But anyway, so that doesn't really matter though, because the whole lawsuit was not about whether or not the apes were racist. It was about whether or not Ryder Rips infringed upon Yuga Labs' trademarks with the Bored Apes. And now this is interesting because one of the things about NFTs and Bored Apes specifically is that like one of the selling points with a Bored Ape is that once you buy it, you have some rights as far as reuse of that artwork. And now it's definitely not the type of rights that a lot of people think that they have when they buy this NFT. So a lot of people believe that like the copyright has been assigned to them in some way, or, you know, they have these very odd beliefs about what they can and cannot do with these apes. But it is true, at least with the Bored Apes to specifically, that if you buy an ape, you know, a very specific one, so like it's got this color hat and it's making this funny face and it's wearing, you know, a tuxedo jacket or whatever, then you can use that very specific ape with the, you know, that outfit and sell t-shirts or hamburgers or whatever that you've like branded with that specific ape. The extent to which Yuga Labs really thought this through when they were creating the apes, not clear to me, because there are some apes that are very similar in terms of like the background color is different, but everything else is the same. And then it's like, well, do I have to have like, when I make my, like if I'm Seth Green making a TV show where the main character is my ape that I bought, like, do I have to have this like orange square following around this whole time? Or like, you know, how does that work, right? Like, because what if it's the same ape, you know, except for the background? Or like, am I not allowed to make him frown because his like silly open-mouthed face is a part of the ape that anyway, this is what I get really interested in because I'm kind of like a copyright nerd. But so anyway, it was very strange to see Yuga come out and basically say like, wait, no, we own the trademark. We're coming after you for doing this thing. And I mean, I see the distinction because like, first of all, it's trademark versus copyright. Second of all, like, it's not like Ryder Rips went out and bought all of the NFTs that he then turned into his own NFTs. And so like, if they were claiming that that was the transference of rights, then yeah, it doesn't really work. But anyway, needless to say, Yuga Labs decided to sue Ryder Rips over his identical NFT project and say, you know, you can't do that. It's a trademark violation. You are confusing people who are trying to go and buy a real ape. They're finding your fake apes and buying those accidentally. You even made a website that is, I think it was called like apemarket.com or something like that. And it was like very unclear that it was not related to Bored Apes and it was related to this knockoff project. You know, all this different stuff they were saying. And so they were saying basically you have to stop doing this, or we want you to stop doing this. We want you to give up all this money that you've made off of it. And he apparently made like over $1 million doing this, which is like, Christ, I picked the wrong job. Like I should have been in crypto scamming this whole time. Anyway, so this lawsuit's been going on for a long time. Ryder Rips's attempts to defend this lawsuit have been very strange because he, you know, they're coming from one direction saying, okay, you violated our trademark. And he's coming back and saying, but you're racist. And he's trying to make all these arguments in court that like, okay, but you guys, for all these different reasons, the Bored Ape projects, are dog whistling, and there's all of these different references, and here we're going to explain it. And the judge is like, I don't like, stop. It's a trademark lawsuit, And so that got kind of old, I think, for the judge. Eventually, so this is finally, this has been at least a year now going, maybe a little bit longer. And finally, they have wrapped up this lawsuit. So there was this brief moment a couple of months ago where they settled like a portion of it, and Ryder Ripps had to, I forget what it was. I think he had to maybe pay some damages or something like that. And then he had to pay some amount of attorney's fees. And we will loop back to that in just a second. As a part of this decision, Ryder Ripps was forced to pay, I want to say $1.6 million, which is the vast majority of that, like 1.4 million of that is basically the ill-gotten proceeds of this trademark violation NFT project. So I can't believe you made $1.4 million off of this, but that aside. And then I think it was $200,000 in damages for like cyber squatting, which had to do with this domain name. And so that was all decided. And then the judge also said that because of Ripps's conduct during this trial, he is also required to pay attorney's fees for Yuga Labs. And that's because he was incredibly like obstructive throughout the whole thing. He was evasive. He was just sort of trolling a lot of the time. He was making claims that like Yuga and their founders and their lawyers and all these different people were racists and pedophiles and like all this stuff that was just really like way outside of how most people would act in court when they're facing the possibility of having to pay $1 million. And so he basically, because of his egregious conduct, was told, all right, you guys now need to figure out what Yuga Labs paid in attorney's fees, agree on some number that is reasonable, and then Ripps is going to have to pay that too. Now, in my newsletter last week, I made some comment about how, like, I don't think that's going to go very well because when they had to meet and decide on reasonable attorney's fees the first time, they couldn't. I forget exactly what it was, but like Yuga Labs gave some 6-figure number and Ryder Ripps was like, what about like 1/10 of that, or something like that. And he did ultimately end up paying less than what Yuga had asked for, but it was also substantially more than what he wanted to pay. Well, the two groups met, conferred, did all of what they were supposed to do. And Yuga Labs said that they spent, let me just make sure I have the number correct, $13.2 million in legal fees and associated costs. And they were like, but out of the goodness of our own hearts or something, we are requesting that you pay around $7.9 million of that. So like, that's a lesser amount at least, but it's still like 5 times what he has to pay in terms of, damages and disgorgement and all that. And Ryder Ripps basically came back and was like, what about like $450,000? And so the two sides are like way apart. It's not like quibbling over maybe $1,000 or something like that. Like they are very far from agreeing on what is reasonable. And, they each made their own arguments where Ryder Ripps was like, I can't believe this, this is so much different than all of these other legal cases where they only paid this amount. And he's basically saying, like, it's not fair for you to make me pay $7 million when I only had to pay $1 million in disgorgement and damages. He accused them of making all these errors in their accounting and like double counting stuff and basically suggesting that they were just like jacking up the attorney's fees. And then on the other side, Yuga Labs was basically like, well, first of all, this case was very different than those cases. And second of all, there's no precedent to say that you can only charge some proportion of like damages versus attorney's fees. I have no clue if that's true or not. That's something that a judge will have to decide, because they're the ones who are capable of evaluating prior precedent, but that's the argument that they're making. And then basically Yuga Labs was like, maybe if you didn't want to pay $7 million, you should have not been so obstructive in the first place, because like it was your obstruction that made it so that we had to pay all of this money, because you were dragging things out and you were relitigating things and you made us like do all this stuff for depositions and blah, blah, blah. And so, you know, maybe if you hadn't done that, this wouldn't be a problem. And maybe if you hadn't been so obstructive, you wouldn't have ended up having to pay this in the first place. So we'll see how it goes. It's up to the judge, I believe, to just make a decision on it. I don't think there's any additional step here, unless maybe they suddenly come to an agreement, but it definitely didn't seem like they're about to. So we'll see how that goes. Rips says he doesn't have $7.9 million just kicking around to pay for legal fees. I mean, maybe he doesn't. I don't, you know, like most people don't. I don't really know what his job is, if he has one. I don't know if he has other sources of income. Yuga seemed somewhat disbelieving of his claim that he didn't have the means to pay, because he said basically that they wouldn't give them proof. But like, I don't know. I would be pretty believing if someone told me they didn't have $7 million, but I don't know. Anyway, I think that's also something that like he can just prove it or he can't, and they'll go on from there. Either way, my favorite thing about this lawsuit, and honestly a lot of lawsuits in crypto, is like neither side is very sympathetic. Like, I don't want Yuga to win because they're, you know, kind of a shady company. They make these pretty garbage NFTs. They're pushing crypto on people who I don't think they should be pushing crypto on. Like, don't love Yuga Labs. But then Ryder also seems like kind of a grifter and, you know, trying to profit off of this weird story he came up with and being just incredibly unpleasant to most people. And so it's like, all right, I'll just sit here and watch this kind of go up in flames and see how it goes. My favorite types of lawsuits are like that, you know? It's kind of like all the stuff that's going on with OpenAI right now and like Microsoft. You know, it's like everyone here sucks, so I can just sit here and watch, and it's not really that big of a deal. All right. Trying to think if there's, oh yeah, there's a little bit more. I'm reaching the end of what I wanted to cover, but there is a little bit more. This is not going to be a 5-hour live stream, by the way. I'm already losing my voice. And also I don't have a full multiple hours of trial to talk about. But I do have the FTX debacle to talk about, believe it or not. So there have been a couple of developments in that case. First, we'll talk about, I guess, the criminal side of things, because it's not that much. Sorry, I'm blurry again. I'm not going to unplug anything. In fact, I have decided I will not touch anything. So one of the things that happened this week, there have been a couple of filings in the case this week. One of them I think is kind of a nothing burger. Basically, the Sam Bankman-Fried's team asked for a little bit more time on post-trial motions. I looked up what post-trial motions are because I didn't know. Basically, it seems like a pretty narrow set of things that you can argue for that I think are granted in pretty rare circumstances. Obviously not a lawyer. I feel like I should be disclaiming that at the beginning of each of these videos. So grain of salt here, but to my understanding, people can basically come in after they've been convicted or acquitted or whatever and say, Your Honor, we think the jury completely got it wrong. They, for whatever reason, their reasoning was flawed. Like something went so badly that I want you to just ignore what the jury said and acquit me, and just say, doesn't matter that the whole jury unanimously found him guilty. I am going to overturn that. So I don't think that happens very often, and I'm pretty sure it happens in only the craziest of circumstances. It does not seem likely that that will happen in this case. When it does happen, it seems pretty clear that it's going to happen based on clear errors that have happened throughout the case from what I was researching. So that's kind of nothing. There's also some other stuff around, it's just similar stuff, very outside of the realm of possibility, things that the judge could do to basically change the outcome of the case. It doesn't seem likely that Bankman-Fried's team would feasibly, successfully argue any of those things. But if I'm understanding correctly, it might be a point at which they make filings to sort of prepare for appeal. So if you're going to appeal a decision, you have to sort of lay the groundwork for it and show that you tried to, overcome, you tried to get these things addressed and, at no point did you succeed. And so, oh no, we have to appeal. And so maybe, they will file some stuff in regards to that. But I think the chances of the judge just being just kidding, everyone, free him. The jury got it so terribly wrong, is really not, I think, going to happen. So that extension is not super interesting. And they only asked for an extra week, and the government was that's fine, we don't care. So there might be some filings coming out soon related to that. The deadline was originally yesterday. I think they pushed it forward. Maybe it was 2 weeks, but either way, pretty soon. And then the second thing actually came through just an hour or two ago, which was the decision by the Second Circuit of Appeals to, was reviewing the decision by Judge Kaplan to send Bankman-Fried back to jail pre-trial. And so I'm sure most of you are familiar with this, but basically there was this whole slew of malfeasance and misbehavior by Bankman-Fried in the period of time between when he was put into house arrest. He's released on bond, told, stay at your parents' house, don't do anything shady. He kept doing all this shady stuff, and eventually the judge was like, you know what, I'm just putting you back in jail because you can't handle yourself. Bankman-Fried asked him to reverse that decision. He said, no, thank you. So he appealed it to the Second Circuit, and that was a very slow process because only just now are they giving their decision on that. Which is, it was about his being released pre-trial. It is now post-trial, so I don't think it would really make a difference. My only thought was maybe, I'm pretty sure that the reason he's in jail right now is simply because he was in jail before. And so maybe if that got overturned, then there would now have to be some question over whether he should be in jail right now. Because, often when people are convicted, there is this weird, awkward period of time between conviction and sentencing where they're just sort of roaming free and everyone's like, boy, I hope they don't run. And so, if his pretrial, jail situation was overturned, maybe they would have to go rediscuss whether or not he should be allowed to just wander around before he is sentenced. But either way, all of that is null and void and moot and etc. because the appeals court was like, LOL, no. They looked at the reasons that the judge gave for yanking Bankman-Fried's bond, and they were like, yep, looks good to us. He totally tampered with witnesses and was trying to intimidate them and all of this stuff. And so, sucks to suck, but you are stuck in jail right now. So that's all kind of nothing. Again, the decision was upheld. He's still in jail. He will presumably continue to be in jail until his sentencing in March. And then, obviously any period of time that he spent in jail pre-sentence will probably be applied to his post-sentence sentence. And so, all's well that ends well. But so that's that. I think that's the only real news in the criminal side of things. There's not been much in the way of other developments. Not much in the way of news around whether or not the trial will go on. The second trial will go forward. I believe the prosecution has until February 1st to make that decision and notify the judge about it. And so, maybe they'll be early, but it could be a minute before we hear about that. And I've continued to hear conflicting beliefs on the likelihood of whether or not that would go forward. I hope it does. I want to learn more about the bribes and potentially the political donations and a whole bunch of other nonsense that was happening. But, it's possible that the Justice Department will be like, it's not worth the resources. This guy's always already looking at a really long period of time in jail. Let's go work, worry about someone else. All right. So that's the criminal side of things. Over in bankruptcy court, there has been some interesting stuff happening. Well, first of all, someone tried to get them to pause the bankruptcy for like a couple of months, and the bankruptcy judge was like, no, we're not going to do that. Basically, someone who is involved in the bankruptcy to some extent, but like not super involved, was like, we need to get to the bottom of what really happened at FTX. And in order to do that, we need months to investigate it. And the judge was like, absolutely not, because these lawyers cost so much money and we're not just going to pause everything for months while you go dig around. So there was some reporting on that. There was some erroneous reporting on that where people thought it was actually the FTX like debtor team that was making that request. It was not. It was like some sort of bit player. The more interesting thing has to do with these adversary cases that the bankruptcy team is filing. So I've spoken about some of these before. They've done one against Sam Bankman-Fried's parents, for example. There are ones against lenders and various other people who owe them money, and they're trying to get that money back. It's all these different lawsuits against a whole bunch of different people, basically all in pursuit of getting money back that they can then use to repay their creditors. And one of the most recent ones was against a company called Bybit, which is a cryptocurrency exchange. FTX says they owe FTX, that Bybit owes FTX just under $1 billion, and that Bybit basically was able to withdraw $1 billion or so in funds because of their VIP access on the exchange. So they, like many other exchanges, were just trading in other different places and had money on FTX. But because they were such a big, wealthy, firm, they got this VIP access. And so as a result of that, they were able to get sort of preferential access to withdrawing their funds when everyone else was scrambling to try to get their money off the exchange because it looked like everything was coming crashing down. And so, as a result of that, the FTX bankruptcy team is basically saying, like, this was illegitimate. You should not have gotten this priority access to getting your money back. You need to give it back, and then we will give you whatever percentage of it, we eventually pay out to all creditors. So that's all happening. That's not super interesting in itself because it's like just a plain old clawback, and there are a lot of those happening. The more interesting part of the lawsuit is, well, there are two things. One is that they claim that Bybit was using their influence with FTX employees to get this preferential access, which is shady and perhaps fraudulent in some way, I think is what they're trying to imply in the lawsuit. The more interesting thing though, has to do with a so-called DAO, which was called BitDAO. It has now been renamed to something very bland. Mantle is the new name. And so basically there's this DAO, quote unquote, decentralized autonomous organization, which is one of these crypto organizations where ostensibly no one's in charge and everyone gets votes, and the votes are distributed based on how many governance tokens you own. And, no one's really in charge. And so whatever the DAO does, and we can't control them. Well, this lawsuit claims that someone over at Bybit told someone at FTX that actually Bybit controls BitDAO. Is that right? Yeah, BitDAO. Which doesn't seem that surprising given the name, but anyway. But they're like, no, it's a DAO. We don't control it. It's just the DAO doing what the DAO does. And there had been this deal between the BitDAO and FTX, or maybe Alameda, I don't know, one of the FTX companies, where they did sort of an exchange. They were like, we'll give you FTT and you give us BIT was the token. And I remember it from a while ago, there was some requirement that they had to hold it for a certain amount of time. They couldn't sell it, blah, blah, blah. But it was sort of this exchange. Well, obviously, FTX, when they went bankrupt, the FTT token plummeted. It used to be worth, I don't know, some amount of money. Now it's worth $1 or something like that. It was very low after FTX collapsed. It's, for crazy reasons, been going back up recently, but still nothing like it was before the FTX collapse. And so BitDAO tried to convince the FTX bankruptcy team, so not Sam Bankman-Fried, but the new guys who were installed after this collapse, the ex-Enron bankruptcy guy, they showed up and knocked on their door, and they're like, hey, we know we did this deal with you where we gave you all these bit and you gave us all these FTT. Well, our bit are still worth something and your FTT aren't worth anything. And so we want to undo that. And we want to get our bit back and not just have all these worthless FTT, which points for trying, I guess. But that's not how it works, And so obviously the FTX bankruptcy team was like, no, absolutely not. We are using these bit, which are worth more than these FTT, to pay back all of our creditors. We're not going to just give them to you. And so BitDAO decided they didn't like that, but had no way of just taking their money back, obviously. And so they decided to do something kind of cagey, a little clever. I'll give them that. It was clever, but it was shady, which is that they decided to basically retire this bit token. And I think this was when the DAO rebranded. Also, they're like, okay, screw bit, no more bit. Bit's lame. We are now Mantle. And there's going to be this new token. And everyone who had bit can now get the same amount of this new token. And so bit's worth nothing now, but this new token is worth something. And you can get the same amount. Oh, but by the way, FTX can't do that. FTX is not allowed to take their old worthless bit tokens and take the new worth something token, which I'm forgetting what the name is. And so obviously the sort of end result of this is that now, so basically they just said okay, screw that. Now everyone except for FTX has the same number of tokens they did before, and we've sort of just deleted the tokens that FTX previously had that they wouldn't give back to us. And so we just decided we're just going to pretend they don't exist and move on with our lives. Well, needless to say, the FTX bankruptcy team was not impressed by this gambit. They have argued that this is a total violation of the stay that is in place when a company is undergoing bankruptcy. It is completely going back on this deal that they signed. And of course, Bybit is like, sorry, it was the DAO. We didn't do it. It was this pesky DAO. And oh no, you can't sue DAOs, because at least that is sort of the common belief in crypto, even though it has become very evident that you actually can sue DAOs. And so they're like, it was the community. We're sorry. That's so inconvenient for you. The unfortunate thing, though, is that the fifth largest voter for this community vote was an executive of Bybit. And they know this because his wallet is like first initial last name .eth. It's like if I was like, I have nothing to do with this DAO, and then you go and look at a DAO vote and mwhite.eth has just cast literally 20 million votes in the vote, and they're like, oh no, it was the community. Anyway, it's just one of those things that is like the funniest like attempt at crime. You know, it's like, you're trying, but it was so bad. It was like, it's like when a 3-year-old tries to tell a lie and everyone knows that they're lying, but they think they're convincing. You know, they're like, I didn't eat the cookies, and they've got cookies all over their front. Like, very much something like that. So I don't expect that the adversary case will go very well for them. They are up against some pretty high-powered lawyers. John J. Ray is a very experienced bankruptcy guy, but then they've got Sullivan and Cromwell and Quinn Emanuel and all these big-ass, like white shoe law firms coming after people very aggressively for funds. And so I don't suspect that Bybit is going to come out on the winning end of this. We'll see. I think that's it for FTX. There was a whole bunch of other stuff this week in bankruptcy world where a couple of companies are closing up shop finally. No big surprises there, but nothing super worth going into in more detail. Oh yeah, and then the last thing, and I think this is very funny, is most people here probably follow tech news to some extent. They're familiar with the saga over at OpenAI this week, where OpenAI just like out of nowhere decided to boot Sam Altman, who is their big face of OpenAI. I am not going to go into a ton of detail over what happened there or why, because no one really knows. It's very weird. There are a lot of questions that I just don't understand. The board put out this statement about how Sam Altman was not being forthcoming with them. He basically implying that he was regularly lying to them, which is a crazy thing for a board to say. Like, pretty much anytime a board fires someone, they put out something super, super bland that's like, it just wasn't working out. He's going to go spend more time with his family. We weren't, our missions weren't totally aligned, or it's like total corporate speak that like they use 1,000 words to say nothing. In this case, when they said something along the lines of like, Sam Altman was lying to us all the time, that's like equivalent of saying like, it's like the nuclear option, it's like, when I read that, I was like, oh my God, did he like kill someone? Like what did he do to cause them to fire him? And so I was like kind of surprised by that. Anyway, I'm not going to go into a ton of detail about that. There's this whole saga where like Microsoft wanted, like, it was a surprise to Microsoft. There was some question about maybe he was going to be reinstated. There were like employees at OpenAI who were revolting because they love their Mr. Sam Altman so much. And Microsoft eventually decided they're going to hire him, and who knows what's happening. All of that is fascinating and really not my beat at all. What is my beat is Worldcoin, which is Sam Altman's other project. So when he is talking about how AI is going to revolutionize everything and blah, 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 he is on the other side also talking about how once AI takes everyone's jobs, everyone is going to need universal basic income, or else the economy will collapse, civilization will completely crumble, etc. I've written a piece about this where I think it is extremely disturbing that he is, on the one hand, selling the problem, and then on the other hand, selling the solution to the problem that he is creating. I think that is disgusting and very concerning. I also think that Worldcoin has served as a very good way to engage in this Krita hype thing that has become very popular in the last couple of years, where one of the ways that a lot of AI people try to promote themselves and their work is by saying, whoa, no, what if AI takes over the world? What if it's this evil god AI who turns us all into paper clips? And like, by doing that, they're actually really promoting themselves, which I think is also very disturbing. Anyway, that's a whole different tangent. But Worldcoin has a token, obviously. And so for those of you who are not familiar, the whole idea is there are these chrome orbs that are like the size of a basketball. They're huge. Like when I first heard about this, I was expecting like, you know, those old webcams back in the day before they had these sleek webcams, they were just like this little baseball that like sat on top of your monitor. I was picturing something like that. These things are big, like big chrome orb, with like a lens on it, and it scans your eyeball and ideally decides whether or not you have opened an account with Worldcoin. And if you've not, it gives you one, and then it gives you your allocation of these Worldcoin tokens. And there's really no use for it right now. And there's also no real stated use case for it in the future other than universal basic income, I guess. Like, they've not spoken about who is going to implement this or adopt it, why someone would do so, you know, what the benefit to someone supporting Worldcoin as like an auth mechanism or whatever would be. But, you know, there's sort of just like, it's like underpants gnomes, right? Like step 1, scan everyone's eyeballs. Step 2, question mark. Step 3, universal basic income. Like that is the Worldcoin strategy. And so there are some people out there right now who hold this Worldcoin token. And when it launched, it was worth some amount of money. I forget what it launched for. It went up, as it often does. You know, when a crypto launches, it goes up in value. People get kind of excited about it. And then it sort of trailed off, which is the typical crypto way, you know, where like there's this initial hype, people get excited, the token price goes up, and then it just sort of gets boring and people stop paying for it. Well, when Sam Altman was ousted from OpenAI, people started making inferences on what that would do to the Worldcoin price, which is so just like disturbing to me, because like, if we sort of imagine ourselves in this horrifying future where AI has taken everybody's jobs, and everyone is somehow now reliant on a token that was created to act as universal basic income, and it was created by this like VC-backed firm, and like, I guess supposed to generate returns for those VCs. That's why VCs invest in things. So now, you know, I've got these tokens that are supposed to pay for my food and my heating bill and my rent and my dog food and whatever else. And now Sam Altman does something crazy, maybe, or doesn't, who knows, gets booted from a board of a different company, like that is not involved with Worldcoin. And now my UBI money is worth 3/4 what it was yesterday. Like, that's just disturbing to me, that like some random Silicon Valley drama that like Kara Swisher is all up in arms about is also now somehow tied to like my day-to-day well-being. I just thought it was like a very wild example of why something like Worldcoin is maybe not the solution to universal basic income. Even if like, even putting the AI stuff aside, there are plenty of people who think universal basic income is a good idea. I think it's a good idea, but please, God, do not make it come from Sam Altman, Worldcoin, Andreessen Horowitz. Like, good Lord, is there possibly a worse way of doing that? So anyway, I thought that was pretty bananas. The other thing, and this is much more lighthearted, and I actually think this is very fun. So crypto is very similar to gambling, right? I actually don't really have a problem with that. Like, I think if people are gambling and they know that they're gambling and they are trying, if they're doing so responsibly and, whatever, it's just for fun, they're not getting coerced into it. They're not getting preyed upon by companies that are trying to addict them to their service, whatever, then like, I think that's fine. People should be allowed to do what they want. There are these prediction markets that people have created, and a lot of them use crypto because they're illegal otherwise. And so you just use crypto and you get around it, and you can bet on basically anything. So, sports gambling, sure, you can go bet on who's going to win the next, Patriots game. But you can also bet on things like, is Sam Altman going to get reinstated? Is, some crazy outcome going to happen? Literally anything you want. There are also some of these that are not crypto related and not money related. So like there's Manifold, which I always forget is not crypto related, but it's not. It's just like fake money. Yeah, I know they're illegal if they use crypto. It's just they don't crack down on it very much. And people just pretend they're not in the US. But yeah, so there's this one called Manifold, which is just play money. Like it's like, Reddit karma or whatever. You get however many points and you can use those to place your bets, and, you get more points when you win and blah, blah, blah. And Manifold has been going buck wild over this Sam Altman stuff, and it's very funny. Someone over there created a question that's like, why did Sam Altman get ousted from OpenAI? And you can just put in whatever answer you want, right? And so there's a bunch of stuff in there that's very reasonable theories, like, oh, he and the rest of the board were disagreeing on how much they should focus on AI safety, or, Altman just wanted to make money. He didn't care about ethics, or what else was there? I put some of it in my newsletter. Oh, obviously, like, the board caught him lying. That seems plausible given the statement. There's been some allegations around, like, sexual abuse that came out from a family member of his that, some people were thinking maybe that had something to do with it, especially given how sort of cagey the board has been. All of that was kind of uninteresting to me because, like, yeah, I get it. Like, there's all kinds of stuff that could have happened, and I can easily come up with those theories as well. And then there's, like, if you just keep scrolling, there's just, like, the crazy stuff. And that's where I literally just was, like, reading through these. There's, like, 150 of them. Too suspicious, constant half smile was one of them. Because he's always got kind of just, like, a little smirk going. He copy-pasted ChatGPT answers to the board is also very good. But my favorite one was poorly labeled, hidden, poorly internally labeled fiat at account. Like, the people on this website have a good sense of humor. I have to give it to them. All right. I think that's mostly it. There's the Elon Musk lawsuit, which is absolute bullshit. Please stop suing people for reporting things. Defamation lawsuits are out of control. Let me just say. Poloniex got hacked for $100 million, which is insane. Like, nobody even noticed. There was, like, too much going on with FTX and now Binance. And it's like, oh, yeah. And also Poloniex just lost $100 million. speaking of Justin Sun and his various travails, a lot of people theorizing that Justin Sun just staged it and like stole the money from himself. Who knows? But one thing I think is very funny is that they have started, so someone stole the $100 million. They did what all crypto firms do when someone steals money from them, and they promised that they would pay a bounty, which is honestly like, I really hate it when people just decide to use words to mean things that they don't mean. A bounty is not a bribe that you pay to someone who just stole a bunch of money from you. That's just like ransom. A bounty, like a bug bounty, when you're talking in like software, is like when a security researcher discovers a security flaw and they report it to you without stealing the money, you pay them for that, and it incentivizes them to responsibly disclose things to you, and they don't go and steal all your money. That's what a bounty is. It's not bribing someone to give you the money back and saying, we won't call the police, that's just like a bribe. Anyway, Poloniex got $100 million stolen. The estimate is a little wonky. It's somewhere between 100 and like 120 million. A lot of money. They promised to pay a quote bounty of 5%, so 5 million, to this person who just stole 100 million. And they said, you know, the usual thing, like, we won't prosecute you if you give us the vast majority of the money back. Well, they didn't get any bites on that. Now they claim that they know who the attacker was. Like, they have their real identity. They could go tell the police right now, you know, chase them down, get their money back. Instead of just doing that, though, they've decided to up the bounty to $10 million. And they also, when they did so, sent a message in 15 different languages to inform the hacker of this. Because apparently they know the hacker's identity, but they don't know which of the 15 languages the hacker can read. And it's like, oh my God, really? Like, you think anyone believes you? That, like, they're just so clearly bluffing. And I don't know why any reasonable person who just stole $100 million would be like, maybe they do know who I am. Anyway, just absurd stuff out of Justin Sun and Poloniex. 10 million of what? Well, the funds that were stolen were mostly Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Tron's token, which is called TRX. The first two of those are actually like feasibly worth something. You can trade $10 million worth of Bitcoin if you want. I mean, it might be hard to cash out, but like, it's reasonably worth $10 million. I don't know about TRX. I don't know how liquid that is. It's probably reasonably liquid. But yeah, I mean, it's $10 million or something. Anyway, that was the most interesting stuff that happened this week. Oh, and a hacker also tried to steal $3 million and then destroyed it all and ended up spending, I think, $8,000 for the whole fiasco, which is just very funny. It's one of those things where it's like, well, everyone sucks. Like, somehow everyone just lost money. Yep, I think that's the most interesting stuff. So I will probably wrap up my rambling then, but I will go back and read through the chat. Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying on gambling. Like, gambling is not a productive feature of society, right? I get that. And I do think it very much preys on people. But I also sort of don't fault a person who wants to go to the casino and spend $100 playing poker. That's kind of what I'm trying to say. I think that the industry is flawed. And certainly not something that should be encouraged, especially the way that, you know, sports betting and stuff like that has become encouraged in the US recently. what with the legislation that has been changed there. It reminds me, honestly, so much of just like the crypto time. There was like this brief period of time, I think, before sports gambling was legalized, where it was just like crypto ads everywhere, and then crypto fell apart, and so now it's just sports gambling ads where all the crypto ads used to be. And I'm like, is this really an improvement? You know, is it really that much better to go try to like, oh, instead of gambling on Dogecoin, now you're gambling on like some crazy derivative bet that you're making on like the number of steps a baseball player takes between home base and first base? Like, I don't know. Oh, someone asked what the books are behind me. That's my collection of random crypto books. So, all right, help me out here. That one is Number Go Up by Zeke Fox. Very good. That one is Easy Money by Jacob Silverman and Ben McKenzie. This one is, I think, called Bitcoin is Magic. Let me just double check. It is. This is called Bitcoin is Magic. I really like the cover art of it. It's by David Z. Morris, who is a crypto author. He used to work for CoinDesk. He got laid off with a bunch of the other CoinDesk people around the sort of saga that was happening there. He did a bunch of writing for Protos during the FTX trial. He has a Substack. He is definitely pro-crypto, certainly more than I am. And I believe this book is as well. I have not yet read it, but I do actually really want to read it because he's extremely knowledgeable. And he gave it to me when we were at the trial. That's going to fall over. Okay. Anyway, I think it's going to be interesting. And I like the cover art a lot. It's cute. The orange one is Survival of the Richest by Douglas Rushkoff, which is not a crypto book, but it's just about tech doomers, honestly. That one is Blood in the Machine by Brian Merchant, who it's all about the Luddites. Really fantastic book. Not only is it just like an incredible history of something that has like become, it's like turned into something that means something very, very different in popular culture. So not only do you learn a lot about what the Luddite movement actually was, it's also just like really well written, just a very enjoyable read. And then that one is Choke Point Capitalism by Cory Doctorow and Rebecca Giblin, which is very good. All right. Getting back to where I was. Congratulations on not being elected to ARBCom. That would be remarkable if I got elected to ARBCom without having run for ARBCom. But thank you. I am delighted with the outcome of that election. Although, wait, the elections haven't happened yet. People are still putting up their nominations. For those of you who are not Wikipedians, ARBCom is the sort of court of last resort, for lack of a better word, on Wikipedia, and it is exhausting to be on it, and I am happy to not be. Thoughts on the possibility that with the Binance settlement, other countries' regulators will try to get settlements themselves? I haven't really thought about it that much. Maybe. There's definitely been a lot of crackdowns on Binance in a bunch of different countries, although they have not been terribly contentious. It's been a lot of like a country saying like, hey, you're not allowed to operate here. You've been registering here, or you've been operating here without registering. You need to stop doing that. And Binance, like by and large, has just been like, okay, fine. And they've left. Obviously, they're not willing to do that in the US. I obviously went on kind of a tangent about this earlier, but they clearly very much value the American market and are not willing to just up and leave in the way that they were in like France or I forget where else, but there were a whole bunch of places where they just like one after another got shut down. And so there isn't a ton of like pending litigation there as far as I know, but it's definitely possible that someone could go after them, especially because they basically have said like, hey, you are operating here unregistered. You can't just leave and be like, well, can't get me now. So maybe. Have I ever read a pro-crypto book? I don't think I've read a whole book that was pro-crypto. I've definitely read a lot of pro-crypto stuff, but not a whole book, I don't think. Where's my copy of Going Infinite? That's a good question, actually. Not down here. It's probably upstairs somewhere. But I don't know if I want to, like, proudly display that behind me. Because, like, I've at least read, I have read all of these except for the Bitcoin one, which I just think is pretty, and would, like, happily recommend all of these books, again, except for maybe the Bitcoin one because I haven't read it yet. I don't think I would recommend Going Infinite. He's all right for a maxi. I assume that's referring to David Z. Morris, who I don't think is a maximalist, really. Do I have any sense of how liquid Binance's reserves are? Nope. I don't even know how big their reserves are. Nobody knows. Yeah, no, I don't know if Binance just has $4 billion kicking around, or if they would have to do something crazy to get it. Who knows? Yeah, great question. Blood in the Machine is so good. I'm glad everyone agrees with me that Blood in the Machine is good. Because honestly, one of the best books I've read this year. So good. No D&D books. No, I don't have any. But those are my dice. Dice back there. I don't have any D&D books. I just look them up online because it's so much easier to be able to find and like search things digitally. Plus, I don't actually play that much D&D. I listen to a ton of D&D podcasts and shows and things like that. Don't play that much. What do I think about the Lords thing? Oh, we're talking about Wikipedia now. Okay, so honestly, the best thing about the Lords thing is that it escaped like the Wikipedia containment zone. Like I saw that Depths of Wikipedia, Annie Ruerta, she's wonderful, posted about the Lords drama on Wikipedia and got like 50,000 likes on it, which is like, and there was like a TikTok that I saw about it that wasn't even her. It was some other person talking about it. Like, it's so wild to me when like insider Wikipedia drama makes it to like mainstream discourse, even to a small extent. It's not like there were, headlines about this or anything like that. I just think that's the funniest thing, that like people who are not Wikipedia editors know about this drama. The short story for people who are listening to me and think that I'm talking about the singer or whatever, there was this crazy thing that happened on Wikipedia in the last month or so where, so you're probably aware that there are administrators on Wikipedia, and it's really challenging to become an administrator. It takes a really long time, especially these days. You have to have edited for usually at least a year on the very minimum end, but usually more than that. Hundreds, thousands of edits. You have to be a very dedicated Wikipedia editor to pass the sort of gauntlet that is adminship on Wikipedia. Well, there was this person named Lourdes, Lourdes, who was an admin, had been an admin for a long time, I think, and there's sort of this weird side of it where she sort of claimed, or she would sort of drop hints that she was this kind of obscure singer named Russian Red, I want to say it was. Yeah, no, sorry, I wasn't thinking that anyone other than Wikipedia editors would know of Russian Red. I was thinking people would think I was talking about Lorde, Lorde. Anyway, she would sort of drop these weird hints that she was this actual, like, somewhat notable but not super well-known singer named Russian Red, but then got very annoyed and upset when people actually tried to, like, directly connect that dot and was like, you're violating my privacy and stuff like that. Anyway, there was this whole saga recently where someone began to suspect that she was not who she said she was, and was in fact sort of a long-term bad actor on Wikipedia. And it eventually she admitted that she was this person who had previously edited with the username Wi-Fi1, who I believe I was actually on the ArbCom when the Wi-Fi1 case happened. That might be wrong, but I definitely did something with like an amendment or something around that. Basically, someone who was editing Wikipedia in a sort of promotional way and was doing so for a long period of time. They had admin rights. They were not supposed to be using their admin rights in furtherance of that. They ended up getting banned. And so this person, Lourdes, created this account and got adminship and edited for like years. And it turned out it was the same person, which is insane. And also she's not that singer. She had this like crazy lore that she had, he really had come up with, where like, not only was he not Russian Red, he wasn't even Lourdes. Like, it was, oh my God, it was insane. And so everyone on Wikipedia was like, what the hell? But then, like I said, it like breached containment, and now TikTok is talking about it because Annie Ruerta, bless her heart, thought it was interesting. And so that is the story there. Wikipedia is a wild place. I love it. Yeah, thank you for linking to the Depths of Wikipedia thread because she does a great job. I am almost caught up. No, I have not talked about CoinDesk having a new owner yet. That is news. I did mention it in my newsletter very briefly. CoinDesk was bought by a crypto exchange called Bullish. Previous to that, they were owned by Digital Currency Group, better known as DCG, which is it's like this conglomerate that also owns Genesis, CoinDesk, a couple of other things that I'm forgetting right now. Genesis is bankrupt. DCG is certainly looking like they're heading in that direction. They are facing a serious lawsuit from the New York Attorney General, fraud allegations, things like that. And so certainly not doing well financially, and have been looking to sell CoinDesk, which is this media outlet, for a while now. And that actually just happened finally after a long time of talking about it. I was a little worried about it because CoinDesk actually does some really good reporting. Some of it's nonsense. I've talked about this a little bit before, but like some of their op-eds and stuff is like, they'll get just like total maxis and people who are very, drinking the Kool-Aid to write those things. But like some of their reporters, especially who do regular reporting, are really, really good and do really good like investigative work. I mean, they're the ones who broke the FTX balance sheet, for example, and basically collapsed FTX, which then in a way sort of took down their own parent company, which is kind of ironic. But anyway, so I was kind of worried that they would sell them to somebody who would like totally change the outlet ruin the editorial independence, make them just a crypto, rag that shills whatever the interests of the owner are, etc. It's a little hard to say at this point whether or not that will happen, but they've at least spoken about not doing that, which is something. They're keeping the editorial management structure in place, I think, which is a good sign. They're not going to like subsume it into bullish. They're going to keep it as a separate thing. So that seems good. But I also don't really know. It's kind of this weird company. Like, I don't really know what they do. They have some gibberish on their website that is like, they try to explain what they supposedly do, and it just sounds like nonsense. Which then again, it's crypto. A lot of that's sort of the strategy. They're also one of the groups that's bidding on the sort of ashes of FTX, which is baffling to me. Like, I don't know why anyone would want that. There's nothing there as far as I can tell. There's like bad code and a ruined reputation, and everyone, like, if someone hears that they're using FTX code, I feel like the first thing they're going to ask is like, wait, is there a backdoor in this that I should be worrying about? So like, I just don't understand that. But anyway. So that's bullish. We'll see how much CoinDesk changes or doesn't, I guess, as a result of that. But hopefully they can keep some good independence and, also have some money again. Would I write a book of my own on crypto? I mean, I don't want to say I never would, but it's not something I've ever been super tempted to do. I like shorter form stuff. Just, I don't know if I would want to write a book. Someone wants to see the doggo. I will wake him up right at the end of this, and have him come say hello. No, I am not playing Baldur's Gate 3. I don't know if this would be the case for me with Baldur's Gate 3, but I have kind of this curse that makes it very challenging for me to play many video games, which is that I get crazy motion sick from most video games that are either like first person, second person, third person. Like, I can do top down, I can do, like a side scroller or whatever, but I cannot do like an FPS or anything like that. I get like terrible headaches. Even Minecraft is like too much. And yes, I know that you can turn off the bob, does not help. Yeah, so I don't know if Baldur's Gate might be a problem for that. I haven't actually watched much gameplay of it though, so maybe it wouldn't be, but I am usually very limited in which video games I can play. Oh yeah, DCG is grayscale. Yes. Does CoinDesk itself actually turn a profit? I don't know, but I would be surprised. Yeah, I would be surprised if they're particularly profitable. They have like a conference that they do, and conferences could be a moneymaker. But besides that, I don't really think they do. I think, well, and I think this is what I was kind of worried about the sale, is that I think their audience is valuable. And so if you had CoinDesk's reputation and reach, and you wanted to suddenly have them publish only good things about your company and things that you had financial interest in, then it could be very profitable. But I think that the way that it was being run by DCG, where it was quite independent, was probably not profitable. Or if it was, it wasn't very profitable. But I would be surprised if it was profitable at all. Oh, Baldur's Gate is isometric. That seems possible. Maybe I'll check it out. I don't know. I would not say I'm a gamer, though. I play the occasional game, but I am not really a gamer. I'm also terrible at most video games. But recently, I've been playing a lot of Oxygen Not Included, which is so fun. It's so cute. I love it. It's by Clay, which is it's the same game studio that makes Don't Starve, if you've ever played that, which is also a really fun game. It's very cute and fun, and I love it. I've literally put like 200 hours into it in a shorter period of time than I would like to admit, I'll just say. Oh no, someone wants me to talk about the Elon lawsuit. Oh boy. Wait, I will quickly answer the video game questions first before going off topic. Yes, I have played RimWorld. It's fun, but it doesn't hold my attention in the way that Oxygen Not Included does. Factorio, a little bit more. But so far, Oxygen Not Included has been the very fun one. Steam keeps telling me to buy Timberborn, which is the Beavers one, which sounds very up my alley. Like, I like city sims and stuff like that. But it's one of those games that, like, it sounds so perfect and fun, but I just, like, I worry that it's not as good as it looks like. But now that a real person has recommended it to me and it's not just the Steam algorithm, maybe I'll check it out because it does look really cute. And yes, Don't Starve is so fun. I don't know what they're doing over there at Clay, but they've got me figured right out because Don't Starve and Oxygen Not Included are super fun. Okay, the Elon lawsuit. This man needs to... I was going to say get a hobby, but I think the problem is that he did get a hobby and that it's Twitter. Yeah, I mean, okay, so I'm not a lawyer. I cannot definitively, or at least not legitimately say that he has no case. I have definitely read lawyers that I think are respectable make that statement, and I'm inclined to believe them. But from what I can tell, and I have read the whole lawsuit because I guess I'm a masochist or something, there's nothing there. Like, he is claiming business disparagement, which is basically like defamation as far as I can tell, except against a business. And he can't really argue that Media Matters has lied because there weren't false statements of fact in the article. Like, they made factual claims, which is that this ad showed up next to this neo-Nazi post or whatever. And so the whole lawsuit, as far as I can tell, is him inferring what a reader might have interpreted that article to mean, and then suggesting that the Media Matters author did not go far enough out of his way to avoid that interpretation of the article. And like, reasonable people could argue over whether or not the author should have been clearer about the frequency with which these ads were being displayed next to neo-Nazi and other sort of heinous content. Like, yeah, that's a totally legitimate argument. It's not a legitimate argument for the court, I don't think. I think it's an argument for, like, people to have over Thanksgiving if they want to start throwing dinner rolls at each other. But, like, that's not... You can't make that kind of argument in court, I don't think. Like, I don't think that rises to the level of defamation by saying it was, like, potentially misinterpretable and they didn't go far enough out of their way to avoid that possibility. Because when you actually look at the claims in this article, which I really don't think that many people who have read about the lawsuit have read the article. It's very short. You don't have to spend that much time reading it. The article literally says it's basically, it looks like it was inspired by this interview with Linda Yaccarino, the new CEO, who said something along the lines of advertisers are now protected from having their advertisements show up next to problematic content, or I don't know, she used some weird euphemism for it. And so what this author did is he went out and tried to see if that was falsifiable. Like, maybe there are instances in which that's not true. And it turned out there were, and he found them. And so he published an article about it. And so now Elon's mad that, like, oh, he manufactured it. And the craziest thing about it was that Elon tried to argue, I say Elon, obviously he wasn't the one writing this lawsuit, but the argument that they're trying to make is, like, we didn't display this ad. This author who created a Twitter account made us display this content next to the other content or whatever. It was like, we didn't do it. He made us do it, which is not anything. Like, that's insane. And also it seems like the whole time I was reading this and I was like, you know, he's making all these claims about how, like, oh, well, 99% of the time we don't show ads next to anti-Semitic content or, you know, neo-Nazi content or whatever. And all I can think as I'm reading that is like, you have a way of, like, confidently identifying the anti-Semites and the neo-Nazis, and you're just not showing ads next to them? Like, isn't there maybe more you could be doing about that? I mean, obviously it's Elon, so he's not gonna, you know, it's like, he's one of them, but, anyway, absolute nonsense. It's just a, you know, beating his chest type of thing, trying to intimidate both the publisher and the author. I made a comment about this yesterday, but it's just wild to me how many people who are ostensibly pro free speech, like Elon, use defamation in this way. Like, it is always the pro free speech, quote unquote, I'm making air quotes just off screen, people who threaten people with lawsuits. It's constant. Like, it's constant that they're trying to use defamation to, you know, pressure journalists or random people online, you know, things like that. And it's gross, and I really wish that people didn't fall for it, because there are so many people out there who are big fans of Elon Musk who truly think that he is pro free speech, and they see behavior like this from him and they don't see it, that it's completely incongruous with things he claims to believe. Yeah. Anyway, I get really frustrated by the way defamation lawsuits are used by people like Elon Musk, powerful people in tech, politicians, Donald Trump, to intimidate, not to, you know, pursue any legitimate claim. A lot of people have been getting very excited about this lawsuit, saying things like, oh, I can't wait for it to go to discovery. It's going to be so fun when it goes to discovery, and, you know, it's going to out all of these things about Elon and, you know, all this stuff, which, like, okay, maybe. I hope it doesn't get to discovery, because that sucks. Like, having to go through discovery is expensive. You have to pay a lot of lawyers to do a lot of work. You know, someone pointed this out the other night on, I want to say it was on Blue Sky, where, like, if you look at, like, the Gawker lawsuit from way back when, like, you can have a defensible side of a lawsuit and still come out on the losing side because you are effectively bankrupted by the lawsuit. And so, you know, I don't think it's really something we should be rooting for, that, like, you know, Media Matters and whichever other organization should be forced to go all the way as discovery. I think we need far better anti-slap laws in many, if not most states. And, you know, the idea of like forum shopping in the way that Elon clearly is doing here by filing this lawsuit in Texas of all places, where like he's not based, Media Matters is not based, the Journalist isn't based, is unacceptable. I hope that they throw out the lawsuit and make Elon pay attorney's fees. Anyway, really grinds my gears is what I have to say about that. And I had a lot of Elon people arguing with me over this and trying to argue that someone tried to argue with me earlier this morning that advertisers withdrawing support for, you know, basically advertisers no longer advertising on your site and people informing advertisers of things that you are doing in hopes that they will stop advertising on your site. They were trying to argue that that was a free speech violation. And I was just like, you've got to be fucking kidding me right now. I don't think GPT-4 is smart enough to do legal discovery tasks. I think any law firm that tried to use GPT-4 to do that would probably find themselves in quite a lot of trouble. People are telling Linda Yaccarino to resign. I feel like her reputation has probably already taken a pretty big hit. But yeah, I don't know if she's just going down with the ship or what is going on over there. But I don't envy her. Ay. All right. I think we've made it. I think I'm going to sign off. It's been awesome hanging out. I've had a really good time. Oh, I meant to update y'all on some of the stuff that I've been working on. So, like I said, I've been trying to set up a bit of a better spot for me to do some video stuff. So this is my usual corner if you've seen me record videos here. What you can't see is that I'm talking to a very different setup than I used to. And I'm going to try to improve it a little bit from here on as well. But I've basically set it up so I don't have to like haul all my stuff downstairs to do a video or a stream or something like that, and then like haul it back upstairs. So that should be good. Gonna try to do more of this because people apparently really like the video stuff and I'm willing to do it. I've also been working on getting a couple more social networks going, just to sort of my strategy. I say my strategy as though I've got like this big plan. But my sort of theory, as I've been doing Web3 is going just great and all my stuff like that, is just trying to like meet people where they are, which is why, you know, I do Twitter and I do Blue Sky and I do Mastodon and all these different things. And there's the website, and if you want to get it on RSS, you can do that. And if you want the newsletter, it comes in your email. So people have been trying to get me to get Web3 is going just great on Instagram and or Threads. I am still trying to figure out what Threads is. I feel like kind of an old lady being like, what is this newfangled social network? But can't really figure out what the difference is between making an Instagram post and making a photo post on Threads is. So anyway, we'll see. But probably going to see about getting Web3 is going just great post to cross post over there. Shouldn't be too hard, at least from the Instagram side of things. The Thread side of things, if I wanted to have it cross post to Threads, I think I'd need to do some pretty cagey stuff. Because, yeah, fellow just mentioned this, there's really not official API. But anyway, I'm going to experiment with it and see what happens. So yeah, well, a lot of things violate TOS, and it doesn't count unless you're caught. Do I have a Discord server? I do not. I'm not sure how much people would want that. I don't know. I also feel like I never fully got Discord. I have one Discord server that I sort of actively talk in, and then I have like 15 other ones that I am a member of and mostly forget about. So I don't know if I would be a particularly good Discord, I don't know, curator. No MySpace, no GeoCities. IRC, let me tell you, back in the day, I did have some IRC bots going. I could probably resurrect one of those guys and get it to post Web3 Scotch's great updates if you needed me to. Yeah, okay, so but someone's talking about YouTube Shorts and stuff like that. I am going to check out the video side of things a little bit more. So something like YouTube Shorts. I think I'm going to look at what TikTok is. I have like a personal TikTok, and I literally have one person on there, and we just send each other dumb TikToks, but I don't even really use it very much. I mostly, this is me being above 25 or whatever. I mostly like see TikToks on Instagram. And so I'm like, what is this TikTok thing? So anyway, I'm going to see what that's all about and if that would be fun. And then when someone's wrong on TikTok about Wikipedia, I could respond to them. That's actually what really matters to me. Anyway. So yeah, spoiler alert, I'm going to try to learn how TikTok works. I am not going to do any dances though, so don't you get your hopes up. People say I shouldn't do TikTok. Let me just double check. What's going on over here? Yeah, people are bashing Threads as being kind of like corporate Twitter, and that is really the vibe that I have gotten. It doesn't seem fun over there, but I have had people ask me to sort of take a look at it, so I'm gonna give it a shot. But I'm hoping the vibes will improve, I guess. Blue Sky is honestly kind of my favorite place right now as far as the vibes, but limiting in that it is sort of private, like linking to Blue Sky posts. I've at least recently found a sort of a workaround where people can see a Blue Sky post if they don't have a Blue Sky account, but I don't believe it has like thread support. And so, like, for example, Mike Dunford and another lawyer did really good threads on Blue Sky on the Elon Musk lawsuit. They're both lawyers. And I could link to like the first post, but if you don't have a Blue Sky account, you can't see the rest of it. And so that's kind of a bummer. I get why Blue Sky hasn't just opened the floodgates because they clearly don't have moderation figured out over there. But anyway, it's a fun place, and I feel like some people I really like to talk to are there, which is great. But somewhat difficult as far as like actually getting to share what people say there, unless I just assume that everyone has a Blue Sky account, which they don't. But if anyone here wants a Blue Sky account, I do have extra codes, so shoot me a DM and I can hand you one. Yeah. Sorry if you can hear my cat using his litter box. Ham radio, that's a good idea. Ham radio and Wikipedia edit summaries are both solid suggestions for new social networks for me. Yeah, Mastodon is great. Honestly, the problem with Mastodon is just discovery. Like, it's hard for me to find people there unless I know them from some other social network and they like share their username there. or like someone I know boosts them, I guess is what it's called. So that's really frustrating. And threading there is really confusing, which is frustrating too. But anyway, someday there will be the ideal social network or something like that, and we won't have to use 20. But until then, this is where we're at. And I will just try all of them and see if any of them are good. All right, I'm going to wrap up. I promised you my dog, so I'm going to put the cap on my water bottle and then show you my dog. Okay, come here, pup. He's asleep, so this may take a second. Come here. Up, up. Oh, there's stuck a boy. Oh my god, I'm on wheels. Little higher. There he is. Just a boy. Thank you. Oh, big yawn. He's got his ears in sport mode. Usually they're... Put your ears up, bud. Put your ears up. Oh, you're stinky. You're so stinky. Are you stuck? Are you stuck? This is Atlas. He's a good boy. Okay, you're free. He's like, why did you wake me up? Anyway, that's the big baby. He's a good boy. He's very excited about Thanksgiving happening because people sneak him food. I don't give him a ton of people food, but my mother is reckless about what she'll give him and in what quantities. And so he is very excited, I think, about Thanksgiving. And I did drop a little piece of like pie crust on the floor earlier today when I was making some, and he got to have that. So things are really looking up for Atlas these days. All right. It's been awesome hanging out. Like I said, I'm going to try to do these more frequently, maybe on some kind of a schedule or maybe just whenever. Probably will try to vary the time a little bit because I did get some complaints from our European friends who did not want to stay up in the middle of the night listening to me ramble. So I might do a couple earlier ones, but I was doing some Thanksgiving cooking today and so wanted to get that done before I hopped on a stream. All right. Good night.